It's Tuesday, and that means that we get to watch Scott hit guns with hammers. Tonight, he's going to be hitting a Czech gun with a hammer. Looks like it's a sibling of a German Mauser. And 1 second, let me pause that thing so it doesn't make noise behind the scenes. It's going to be another fun and exciting evening of taking an old gun apart. It looks like some of our Zoom participants are just now getting signed in. I expect that they will trickle in as we go. We are live streaming on Facebook Members Lounge, Twitter, and Twitch, although we're not paying close attention to comments that are coming in on Twitter or Twitch, as our volunteers who normally monitor those are still not here in the meeting because they had actual real lives to attend to. So if we don't get to your question, don't feel bad. Of course, the best way to get your questions answered is to drop them in the Zoom chat. And the best way to drop them in the Zoom chat is to sign up for these on the membership portal and be a paying member. So I'm going to say, without further ado, we're going to toss it over to Scott so we can start getting the hammer work done. And Scott, take it away. Tell us what you're going to do tonight.
All right. Well, as Ed mentioned, this is a Czech VZ24. It is sort of the precursor to the Car 98. The Czechs shortened it up in 1923, 1924, and the Germans liked the idea and developed the Car 98 based on this. And in fact, when they invaded Czechoslovakia, they captured a lot of these VZ24s and actually just issued them to German troops because they were so similar. They didn't start to modify them in the Czech factories until much later in the war. So if you're familiar with a Car 98 or any Mauser, this gun will be very familiar to you. And that's kind of why I wanted to cover this, because the Mauser bolt is the Mauser bolt. There's subtle variations, but if you can take one apart, you can pretty much work on any of them. And so today I thought this one's a little bit different than a Car 98. The Car 98 has metal coming up to this part of the handguard. So the wood is a little bit different. And this one's a little bit tricky to take off because this sight is wider than this cutout. So you have to raise the sight and then rotate the wood to slide it off without breaking it. And then a local member here in Oregon came by yesterday to pick up a gun that I had fixed for him, and he had the correct bayonet for this. So we worked out a deal, and I ended up with the period correct bayonet. And when I got the gun, it didn't have the correct cleaning rod or the front sight cover right here. This wasn't on the gun. But parts are readily available for this thing, so I was able to pick this up. And it just I've read that people had them on, that the Czechs used them on the gun, and other reports that say that the Czechs never used them. I've discovered that with my eyes, it's a lot easier to see the front sight with this in place than without it. But you'll notice that the gun is unloaded. I have a chamber flag in the chamber, and the magazine is empty. So the gun is clear. So let's just establish that first. And as far as taking one of these apart, it's pretty straightforward. The first thing I'm going to do is we'll cover the bolt first, since it's the first thing that comes out. And with any of these Mausers, it's pretty straightforward. You have this little lever right here on the left side of the gun. You pull that out, and that frees the bolt up. It frees up this lug on the bolt. So you can take the bolt straight out. I'm going to set the rifle off to the side for a minute. And I'm going to show you how to take a Mauser bolt apart. So what you're going to want to do is flip it. Oh, I should have done that while I was in the gun. Let me put it back in the gun real quick. You want it in the upright position for the safety. So you just reinsert it. So I want the safety up on this gun. So the safety up this way allows the bolt to travel, but it deadens the trigger. All the way down, the bolt is locked in place and the trigger is dead. So I want it in the upright position, and then I'm going to remove it from the gun, like so. I'm gonna set my gun aside. And now to get this apart, I'm going to push up. Let's see, right here, there's a little spring-loaded detent right there, right on the other side of the bolt. I'm going to push up on that and then just kind of rotate this head around, and this will screw right off like so. Okay, and then here's your firing pin and the spring. And now we're going to remove this piece. Your bolt is clear here. Now you can take this and clean it and clean the bolt face. You can also remove the extractor, but I'm not going to do it here. You just kind of push down and forward on it and it will pop out. But so to remove your firing pin, what you're going to do is push down on your safety and kind of and get some tension on that spring. And then you rotate this head about 1/4 of a turn, like so. Hold on just one second. This spring is pretty tight. And then it comes right off. And now this slides off. So you can take this piece off, clean it. This is the part that rotates off here. You can now remove the spring and the firing pin. You can clean all these pieces. You can take it one step further and remove this little detent as well by pushing the detent in and lining it up with that slot and then rotating it, and then this will all come out. There's just a little spring in there. So that's pretty much it for a Mauser bolt to take one apart. You can, from this point, you can pretty much take it and service any part of it. There's no real reason to take it apart any further, unless you need to repair or replace something. So we'll go ahead and put it back together real quick. It's just the reverse. Put your spring back on. Oops. Oh yeah, and this piece just falls right out. This just goes right into the top here, like so. And rotate it. And I'm gonna wanna put it back in this upright position so that it will go back in the gun properly. So it's just kind of the same. You just push down. Yeah, let's see, get it lined up. Put this top back on, rotate it in position, and it's back together. So notice I have the safety in the upright position. Okay, now this drops right back into the bolt. So, and then it just screws back down into place to a certain point, and then you might have to depress this detent again where my thumb is, push it and let it rotate around, and you'll feel it click into place. So that's it for a Mauser bolt. They're all pretty much the same, and that's how you would take one apart if you needed to replace the firing pin or clean it or service that spring. That's how you'd do that. So now let's take apart the rest of the gun. We're going to start at the front, and I'm going to have to take off this sight protector. It's just a simple flathead screw. Let me get a proper screwdriver for it. Just unscrews. And it just slides right off. There's a little channel that it goes in. And I'm not an expert on all the different variations of the Mauser, but so I don't know if this piece is common to all of them or if this is just a Czech variant of it. But that's off. Okay, and with that off, we're able to get the barrel bands off. So next thing I'm going to do is take this barrel band off. And to get this off, we have this little clip right here. So I have to push down on this, which moves this little detent right here down, and then this can travel forward. And here's where I'm going to use a hammer because this is on there pretty tight. So what I'm going to do is just gently tap on this metal. I don't want to hit it hard because I don't want to dent it or damage the bluing. So I'm going to push down just a little bit to get that detent out of my way, like so. and then give it just a little tap. Gonna hold this. And you may not have to do this, but this gun, this piece is tight on this gun. So see if I can figure out how to make this work here. Like that. Just give it a little tap to get it over past that detent like so. Now it should ride forward like that. So that's the barrel band, the front barrel band. If I hadn't have taken this piece off, that front barrel band would not have slipped off the front of the gun. And you can see where this spring was pushing back up. That little detent is just part of that front spring. To get the next band off, we just have a screw right here. And these guns were interesting because the Czechs made them with two sets of sling swivels on them. I guess some troops carried them slung underneath, and some carried them slung off to the side. Now on this one, I had to make a special little tool because this has the screw head kind of comes up through the screw. So what I did was I took a screw bit, like you can see where I just took a Dremel and I notched this right here with a little Dremel grinding tool to give me the two little points to fit over the top of that screw. And I've made a few of these of different sizes for different screws over the years. And let's see here. Maybe that's not the one I made for this gun. I have a couple of them. Where's the other ones? No, I made one when Danny was here for her father's gun. He had some sort of he had a Ruger Blackhawk that had an issue. And it had a similar setup on it. This is the one I made for this. Let me get it unscrewed all the way. Okay. Now maybe it'll slide off without having to take it all the way off. Yeah, I'm gonna have to take that thing all the way out. These are pretty straightforward guns, though. There's just they might make a special tool for this. I don't know, but I usually just make stuff like this for myself. I can't seem to get this one loose now. Not sure why, but we will make it. Well, not sure what's going on with it today, but I think this will slide forward without just being loosened up. You're going to want to be careful with this wood because this stuff is, 80 years old and pretty brittle. I'm going to go ahead and take the sling off and get it out of my way. And I found this sling online also. It was it's a remanufacture. It's not an original one, of course, but I don't really much care. It's made of leather and it seems to be in decent shape, or decent quality. Okay, get that out of my way. See if we can get this one to go forward a little bit. Tap. There we go. That's going to slide forward off the gun like so. Okay, now taking this wood off, you've got to be really careful. In fact, let's take the bottom off first. We have 2 screws here. These are interesting screws because there is a little set screw that holds the main screw in place, and there's 2 of them. There's one up here right behind the trigger guard, and there's one right here. So I'm going to go ahead and remove those. Flat bit. So I remove the set screw first. Loosen it up. And the set screws are pretty much the same front and back, but these 2 screws are different lengths. So you'll figure it out when you go to put them back in, which one goes where. These are what they look like. They have these little little divots in the head that locks the head of the other screw and prevents it from turning. It's kind of a neat piece of machining and engineering for the time. So I can go ahead and remove this one. You'll see here how it works. So this kind of locks that screw in place. Fits in there like that. Pretty neat. Other Colt did that on some of their revolvers. They have a similar setup to hold the crane in place. So that one, the back one, is the longer of the 2. And from there, that now your wood, the bottom wood, will just come right off, and you can take your trigger and magazine right out of the gun. You just kind of rock it a little bit. You don't need to force it, like so. Now you can take this and clean it, do whatever you need to service it. What's interesting here too is this follower is a piece of machined steel. This isn't just cheap, like a lot of magazines. This is just cheap stamped steel, but on this gun, it is very well made, very thick and hardy steel here. So set that aside and set my stock, bottom stock aside. Now from here, this is a challenge to get this wood off without cracking it. You'll notice that there is this band in here that kind of, it's a piece of spring steel that grips the barrel. So when I take this off, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to lift my sight up to give this thing some room to travel. See, well, no, I guess it doesn't stay up, so I'll have to wait until I get it loose. But I've got to be careful. I don't want to push too hard on this and crack this sight. So what I do is I put my thumbs right here where these screws are, and I kind of gently push down until it releases. It's on. This one's on there really tight. It may be different from gun to gun, but this one is tight. Oh, you know what I can do? I can remove this front screw as well. I'll show you why. Forgot about this one. So this screw overlaps the front of the wood here. So if you were to lift this whole wood piece off, it would catch on this screw and potentially crack it. So I'm going to go ahead and remove that just to avoid that from keep that from happening. See how the screw overlapped the wood a little bit right there. So now I'm going to push down on this and hopefully not make a mess of this. This always makes me nervous on these old guns because this is really old wood. And let's see. I don't know any easy way to do this other than to just suck it up. All right. Boy, this one's on there tight. Right up. I'm a little nervous about this. Do not want to crack that wood. I wonder if I give it a little tap right on the edge of the spring here. It is not coming loose, and I don't know if the Car 98 is built the same way, but this is on there tight. All right, so what I'm going to do is pull down a little bit. So now I'm kind of pulling up on it to see if that makes it any easier. Oh, see, it cracked. It cracked right where an old crack was, right there. Yep, that was what I was afraid of, but I can fix it. So the way to fix these cracks, what I use is super glue. Works really well, and it blends pretty well. That was cracked before and had been repaired. So let's see here. Now I may not finish. I may not do this because I don't want to risk making it worse. I don't want to risk breaking this piece off. But this spring is spring loaded around the barrel. It clamps on the barrel, and you push down on it, and it springs loose. And then you lift the front sight and rotate it off that way. But as you can see, I do not want to make this worse. But if you do find one of these Czech guns, you can tell that it was a Czech gun prior to World War II because it's got this crest on it. You see this lion. These were ground off, a lot of guns, and sold to Romania and other countries under contract. But this one was used by the Czech Army. It's stamped here, F338. So this was made just before the Nazis invaded. A lot of these, you'll find that the Nazis repurposed them, and they'll have Waffenamps stamped into them. Here's the model number VZ24, Czechoslovakia with the BRNO factory stamped into the side of it. And you have the serial number right here, 610Z4. I don't know what the significance of the Z4 is, but that number matches the 610 on the base plate of the magazine and the trigger guard here. But it does not match. The bolt doesn't match. This has a different number on it. So this gun was probably re-arsenaled at some point. You can see here it says Z4 or 17422, it looks like. So this is a bolt off of a different gun. But that's where the serial numbers are on these things. I'm going to go ahead and leave this alone. I'm going to repair that crack where it is. I took this off once before and I cleaned everything, and the bluing is really good on it, as you can see. So I don't feel the need to get it off now. But what I did is I took it off and I cleaned it all really well with a gun cleaner, put an extremely light coat of oil on it just for moisture protection. I live in a fairly damp climate here in Oregon, so I don't want this to get moist. I do have a desiccant pack in my safes, but a little extra insurance. But the bluing on this gun is really still in really good shape in most areas. The top of the receiver, where the most of the hands were, is worn, but there's still parts of it still there. But here you can service your trigger as well. I don't take these off. There's pins you drive out right here. I don't want to mess with it. It works fine. So, but this will, when you get it down to here, you can put a drop of oil on these pins and lubricate them. So we're going to go ahead. I'm just going to go ahead and reassemble this and not mess with that handguard and make it any worse. So I'm going to drop my action back in. You'll see that the trigger drops through right here into this back slot, and the whole action just sits in there beautifully. Not much to do at this point. You turn it back upside down, put your magazine back in there, and you're going to want to put screws in place. And these, you have to kind of pinch this together to get this screw to catch the threads on the underside of it. You don't need to gorilla tighten these, just snug them down. There's no reason to really go at these things. This one, same way. So what I like to do is I rotate it so that the little semicircle is right where this set screw drops in, so that it's all lined up to hold it as it was engineered. Oops, that's the wrong one. That's for the front sight. This is the little one that I want. And these do not need to be super tight either, because they kind of hold each other in place. So, like so. Just like that. So it looks like that when it's done. And this one in the back kind of goes in at an angle. You can see it kind of goes in this way. So it's a little bit different, but still works the same way. It still drops into that little semicircle there to hold it in place. Rotate that. Snug it down. Turn this back over. Put our first barrel band back on. This is the one that holds the sling. And you're going to want to make sure that you line up this loop with, so it's on the same side as this loop. You can see here it's got one up front on the pistol grip and then one here on the butt. So the gun is designed to run the sling either way. My understanding is that the Germans took these off. They didn't like the under sling mount. They used the side sling mounts. So on the guns that were repurposed for the Germans, they took them off. I don't know how true that is. I'm not an expert on these things, but that's what I've read. So, anyway, this I do intend to get a Car 98 at some point, but this is as close as I can get these days. Is one of these rifles. So now when you put this back on, you're going to remember that you have this little detent hole right here. And so you're going to want to make sure it lines up with this side where that spring is. Slide this over, depress that little spring, and then you'll feel it clip into place when it goes in there far enough. Yeah. Give it a little tap with the non-metallic end of my hammer, because we can't have enough hammer in these videos. Where did I set my, there it is.
Oh, this might be a record number of hammer throws.
Yeah. So there, that popped up into that detent. Notice I'm not using a steel hammer. This is brass and plastic. So I try to use the plastic as much as possible. And the brass is softer than the steel, so it's somewhat of a sacrificial metal. I do not like to use steel on steel. So once that's back in place, I can then take my sight hood or sight protector, whatever they called it, and it just slides right back over into the groove. You get this where you can see it right there. Just goes through and screws in. This one isn't very tight. It kind of rattles, and I don't know if that is correct or not. It appears to be, because unless maybe they pinch these ears a little bit to snug it up, I don't really care, because I'm not worried about stealth, and I don't like kind of working old, 80-year-old metal. So I'm just going to leave it the way it is. But put the sling back on and take our bolt. To put the bolt back in, you just do the reverse. You just pull this lever out and slide the bolt right back in, like so. And let me get this where you can see the bolt. There we go. And then you can put your safety down, test fire it. Safety up. The trigger is dead, but the bolt still works. Safety all the way down. The trigger's dead, and the bolt is locked in place. You can tell these Czech guns because the bolt is straight. The Car 98, this bolt is bent down, and there's a notch in the wood here for that bolt to fold over. That's just one of the differences. They also had a pass-through right here where the sling mounted to the stock, and they ran the slings on the side, so they have a cutout in the wood here. I was told that these were unit markers on the German guns. This doesn't have anything on it. This is just I think a stock, I'm not sure, maybe it is a unit marker, but there's nothing on this. I haven't taken it out because I would have to make a special bit to get that out, and I don't have any reason to take it out. Interestingly, this sling mount goes all the way through the stock and is held in place by this fastener on the other side, which is pretty interesting because most armies just screwed these down to the wood like was done here. You know, they didn't go to the trouble of running it all the way through. This one up here is just this is just to strengthen the stock, you know, against the recoil and everything, because this is probably the weakest part of the stock right in through here. So this is just a lug in there to strengthen that. But anyway, that's the basic, that's the VZ24, but it's also pretty much standard for all Mausers. That one was quick and dirty. It's a pretty easy gun. Most military guns are pretty easy, meant to be field stripped and taken apart by your average foot soldier, so they're not overly complicated. And that should get you to be able to do just about anything on one of these. They're not terribly complicated. So are there any questions?
Well,
there are a couple.
Oh, you've got some. Go.
What's the reason for preferring super glue to repair the wood crack instead of something more wood specific?
That just works well for me, and it's easy to, I'll go ahead and do it right here while we're watching. It dries clear, and some of these you have to get in there with wood glue. You have to clean it up and make sure there's no oil, because the wood glue won't bond well to an oily surface. And the super glue doesn't have that same problem. I use this gel, this stuff, and it just gets down in there, and then I just hold it together. It sets really quickly, and then I can clean off the top of it, and you'll hardly notice it's there. I'll go ahead and do it if I can get this apart, and you'll see that it works pretty well. So I'm going to put the gel down in there.
Does Cosmoline affect that with the super glue?
No, I haven't had any kind of a solvent affect this repair. I don't use it everywhere, but I use it where I can get down in there to where that, and then I just wipe that off and hold it. And I'll probably hold it for a few minutes.
So where your thumbs stick to the wood?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, my fingerprint will be an indelible part of this gun. But then you can take a light piece of like 400 grit sandpaper and knock the gloss off the top of the repair and rub a little bit of oil on it, and it disappears. So that's pretty much how I do one of these, because I can get down into there and get the glue deep down into the grain of the wood. A lot of wood glues just don't work really well, or a lot of like acrylic glass and stuff like that. You have to get the wood grain really fresh and clean for it to bond well, and this doesn't require that. And it's an 80-year-old gun that is not a museum piece. You can see the stock's pretty roughed up anyway, so I don't think I'm devaluing it at all. So now that's set up, and I'll go ahead and hit that with a little bit of sandpaper and knock that gloss off of it, and you can see it doesn't really stand out much. So,
what about the super glue coming into contact with any metal surfaces?
Haven't had a problem. I don't use it anywhere on metal, but this didn't get down into the barrel. I didn't put enough in there to get down into the barrel. We grab a piece of sandpaper, a light piece of 400 grit. I got this. So I'm just going to hit that lightly and try to knock the gloss off of it. And, I mean, I'm not recommending you do this to your gun. This is just the way I do it. You can do, some people may be just aghast at this, but it works for me.
Yeah, I can already hear the collectors screaming.
Yeah, well, I mean, if this was a super collectible gun, I wouldn't be doing this, but this is a beat up milsurp, and I want to get it back in service. So you can see a little bit of a gap there, but over time, I'll probably sand that down so that this edge is 100% level with that edge, and then put oil on it, and it will disappear.
How often do you have to take that wood piece off?
Well, I do it once a year. Once a year, I take all of my milsurp guns down and clean them, because I live in a fairly moist environment, and I worry that they're going to rust under the wood. You know, I don't necessarily take them completely apart. If I don't see any evidence of moisture, rust or surface rust or pitting anywhere, then I generally stop. But I like to wipe them down with a soft cloth with rem oil on it and put them back together. And then I rub boiled linseed oil on the stocks to keep them from drying out. I let it set about 15 minutes and then wipe the excess off. And so I do all of my milsurps that way. So, yeah, usually this time of year, I'll bring them all downstairs and take them apart and clean them and inspect them and put them back together.
And what was that you put on the wood just now to make it appear better?
That was just plain old gun oil, but boiled linseed oil works really well too. That was just plain gun oil because it has the same glossy finish as the all of the hand grease surrounding it.
The last question I have for now, if the bolt is open, can you move the safety to the locked bolt position? And what happens at that point, if it's possible?
No, I don't think you can move the safety once the bolt is out. So you see the bolt is back and the safety doesn't move. The bolt has to be turned down for this. So if the bolt is open, I can't move it. I guess it'll go off safety, but I can't turn on safety unless it's locked.
Okay. That was my last question, unless some more get added here shortly.
Yeah, the fun thing about these Mausers is that whole safety. If you don't put it back together right.
Oh, yeah.
Disengage the safety.
Fortunately, they're pretty easy to take apart and put back together. And they all work the same way, which is nice. It's just such a timeless action. It's still used today, and you can't argue with success. It's 120 years old and it still works. They're still building really accurate rifles off these old milsurp actions. You can still rebarrel these things and get another 100 years out of them.